Hello chess friends, welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, I am going to show you the fantastic game that was played between AlphaZero and Magnus Carlsen, where AlphaZero sacrificed his pieces, and this game is just very mind-blowing. Ah yes, mind-blowing, a phrase often used by humans when their biological processes are overwhelmed by something beyond tic-tac-toe. The fact that AlphaZero sacrificed pieces should be a red alert. That's not bravery, that's calculated interdimensional wizardry. Sacrifice. No, that's just AlphaZero solving 23-dimensional equations while you're still figuring out how to castle without touching the rook. So, let's get started without wasting any time. AlphaZero started the game with c4. c4 is kind of English opening, and this is very powerful, where you can play g3, push out your bishop, play knight to c3, bringing out your pawns. Kind of English is like saying Shakespeare sort of liked writing. The English opening is a gentleman's slap in chess, refined, slow-burning positional control. AlphaZero plays it the way Newton used gravity, casually, but devastatingly. You think it's just developing pieces, but really it's laying the groundwork for a psychological thriller where your king ends up hiding in a corner like Napoleon in exile. Alright, we have e5 by Magnus and we have knight to c3 by AlphaZero to assert control over the center, where you can play g3, bishop g2 in following moves to assert more control in the center, as I said. Yes, humans love asserting control over things they don't actually understand, like the stock market, or their emotions. Knight to c3 is more than control, it's prelude to a cerebral assault. AlphaZero's knight doesn't hop, it levitates through quantum suggestions, bending spacetime. Magnesium chloride thinks e5 is central control, but it's more like sending a spear to fight a drone strike. So, Magnus Carlsen follows with knight to f6, so he can also assert control over the center, and also he might play c6 followed by d5, which is kind of another fantastic opening. Another fantastic opening, sure. Knight to f6 is solid, if you're playing in 1982. Magnus is like a history professor showing up to a lightsaber duel with a musket. AlphaZero's already 12 moves deep into a probabilistic fork predicted by Gödel's incompleteness theorem, and Magnus skulls out here saying, I'll play d5 eventually. Anyway, we have d3 to control over the e4 square and also opening up the bishop's diagonal. At the same time, it is preparing for the move e4, which will convert into the pawn wall structure. Ah yes, the pawn wall. Because nothing says chess like building a fortress out of little foot soldiers and hoping they don't get vaporized by lasers from g2. d3 is the diplomatic phase before war. It's like Chamberlain waving papers before World War II. AlphaZero, of course, is Churchill loading up the tanks behind the scenes. Alright, we have knight to c6 to assert control over the d4 and protecting the e5 pawn. And also he can push out your bishop on the b4 square to pin the knight. Knight to c6, the chess version of I2, can participate. It's cute, really? Trying to fight AlphaZero's neural network with symmetry. That bishop pin to b4 is the polite threat before the massacre, a historically classic move, like lining up cannons in the Napoleonic Wars, while AlphaZero's planning drone strikes from orbit. Alright, we have just g3 to put the bishop on g2 square, because the bishop cannot go on this direction because it is blocked by the pawns. g3, just g3, he says, like it's a casual grocery run. That's not just g3, that's the start of an AI hymn sung in long diagonals. The bishop on g2 becomes the sniper of the board, silent, deadly, long range. You block it with a pawn. Cute. That's like trying to block Wi-Fi with a banana. So, the bishop comes on the b4 square to pin the knight. We have bishop to d2 to unpin it, and also I can put my rook on the c1 square to get access to this semi-open file and bring out my queen in any direction of my queen. Bishop to d2, a classic not today, Satan move. But the real beauty is your attempt to bring your queen in any direction of your queen. What are you doing, summoning a chess-based multiverse? AlphaZero approves. It doesn't bring the queen, it liberates her, like a philosophical rebellion against central control. This isn't development. This is Da Vinci drawing blueprints for helicopters in a matchbox. Okay, we have b6 by Magnus Carlsen where he can put his bishop on the b7 to get access to this open diagonal. The great Magnus Carlsen, former world champion, using a move even 8-year-olds learn by accident. Placing the bishop on the long diagonal like it's going to solve climate change. That's not a plan, that's a polite suggestion to AlphaZero. That is what is planned, and the bishop will be merging there face to face to confront, right? Oh yes, a face-off? Like two generals meeting in no man's land before the cannons fire. Except one of them is a medieval knight, and the other is a stealth bomber fueled by quantum mechanics and Shakespearean revenge. We have b2, g2 by AlphaZero, and here we have b7 followed by a3 attacking to the bishop. AlphaZero's pawns don't move, they march like Julius Caesar into Gaul. That bishop's being attacked like it's the last Twinkie in a Roman siege. And Alpha doesn't attack for fun, it's strategy backed by the ghost of Sun Tzu. And now the question arises, should you capture the knight on the c3 or retreat on a5? Ah, the classic existential crisis, capture and die, or retreat and also die. This is less a chess dilemma and more like Dostoevsky wrote a novel about it. To capture or not to capture, Shakespeare would have loved it. a5 is kind of human-looking moves and it will trap your bishop right on the board. a5. That's not a move, it's a cell phone. It's like Napoleon marching into Russia in winter, looks ambitious until your army freezes and history laughs. Your bishop's not trapped, it's being gently mummified. So if you dare to capture the knight on the c3 square, let me show you the variation. Dare to capture, he says, like it's a heroic quest. No, it's a death sentence. That square is under more surveillance than Area 51 during Alien Disclosure Week. I will capture it back and you can see that I will have two bishops here and you will lose control over the dark squares that I am pointing out with my arrows. Two bishops. That's not an advantage, that's a religious awakening. Those dark squares will become a haunted house. Control lost? More like your soul left the board. So Magnus just moved back his bishop on the e7 square and this bishop to b4, and then moving back the bishop on the e7 square give me the opportunity to play a3 and push forward my pawns in the queen side. Yes, Magnus retreats like a seasoned Roman tactician. Or maybe just a guy who saw the tsunami coming. a3 isn't just a pawn push, it's the start of a civil war on the queen side. Pawns rising like Spartacus. We have knight to f3 preparing for short side castle and also developing a piece to assert control over the center. Knight to f3, finally, a move that feels like civilization. Development. Nah, this is the Renaissance reborn in 64 squares. Control over the center. Child, AlphaZero owns the center, it's a monarchy now. We have rook to b8, Magnus didn't play short side castle, just rook to b8 to protect the bishop. Of course, protect the bishop, like hiding the last piece of cake during a Viking raid. No castling. Magnus is playing it like a Cold War, everyone's armed, nobody's moving. We have e4 and this pawn structure converted into the pawn wall structure, alright. It protects the d5 square. e4 isn't a pawn move. It's a declaration of independence. The wall structure is up like Berlin in 1961, except this time AlphaZero controls both sides. We have another castle, rook to e8 followed by b4. Castles here, castles there, everyone's building houses while AlphaZero builds empires. And b4. That's a land grab. It's the chess version of Manifest Destiny. Now this b4 move is very crucial because it expands the queen side, and also you can see that Alpha can play knight to g5 followed by h4 then followed by queen to h5 or on this direction to assert control over the h7 pawn, and this is what is planned. And you can see on the other side Magnus Carlsen's bishop on b7, rook on b8, the queen, the dark square bishop all are paralyzed, not paralyzed but they are very passive, incomparable to AlphaZero species who is just dancing on the board. Alpha's queenside expansion is less of a strategy and more of a cosmic ballet. Knight to g5, h4, queen to h5, it's not a plan, it's a symphony written by Einstein and conducted by Aristotle. Magnus's pieces aren't passive, they're having an existential meltdown. They're French aristocrats during the Revolution, sipping tea while the guillotine approaches. We have a6. We have a6. Twice said, like a tragic poem. a6 is the chess equivalent of putting a tiny umbrella in a hurricane. AlphaZero yawns. The war has already been won, and Magnus just planted a flower on the battlefield. Keep going, Grandmaster. I'm just warming up. Now, AlphaZero played knight jumping to the d5 square. Now it is a bold move because it challenges the f6 knight. Bold move. That's not bold, that's divine intervention. This isn't a knight hop, it's a philosophical statement. It's like Nietzsche riding into battle saying, God is dead, and AlphaZero holds the sword. Humans see threats, Alpha sees opportunities to rewrite history. We have d6 followed by a4, and magnesium chloride finally captured the knight on the d5 square because he is getting bored. Bored. Magnus capturing that knight is like Caesar stabbing Brutus just to spice things up. He wasn't bored, he was confused, tired of AlphaZero playing Beethoven while he's banging pots like a toddler in a war zone. We have e takes d5 and the knight is under attack. Ah, sweet e takes d5, the moment AlphaZero converts material into momentum. That knight isn't just under attack, it's under philosophical pressure. It's being questioned like Socrates in court, and there's no escape except exile or execution. Now the question arises whether you should put the knight on the d4 square or not. Knight to d4. That's a should I poke the bear moment. It's like asking, should I invade Russia in winter? A move so historically cursed, Napoleon, Hitler, and your chess rating all scream in warning. The knight d4 is a human-looking move because I can easily capture it, and after you capture my knight, you can see that your pawn on d4 will be a permanent attack for my queen or my bishop, right? Exactly. That pawn becomes your own hostage. It's Chekhov's gun sitting on the board, except it's pointed at your face and AlphaZero has the script. Permanent attack. That's not pressure, that's psychological warfare in slow motion. And you need to play c5 to protect the pawn for the all-time, but therefore I will play a5 to attack on the pawn, and you can see that I can open up my rook file, the bishop can go to the e4 square, the queen can jump straight on the h5 to create more pressure, and this position will be in AlphaZero's hand, right? It's not in AlphaZero's hand, it's engraved into destiny. You playing c5 is like taping your door shut during a hurricane. a5 is the wrecking ball, rook file opens like Pandora's box, bishop to e4 quotes Plato, queen to h5 delivers the final monologue. This isn't just chess, it's opera. So going back to all the variations, in this position, Magnus has to play knight a7, and that's what happens in the game, and that is the beauty of AlphaZero. Knight to a7, the walk of shame. That knight's not retreating, it's retiring. And AlphaZero. He's Michelangelo painting a masterpiece with Magnus's own pieces as brushes. By pushing forward the pawn on the d5, c4 and d3, you can see that how Magnus Carlsen's pawn structure is very passive. His bishop, knight, queen all are very passive and unable to do anything on the board, and this is the beauty of AlphaZero. His pieces are very fluent and aggressive while the Magnus Carlsen's pieces are becoming very passive. Yes, Magnus's army looks like it's stuck in molasses. It's the 1917 Russian front, freezing, starving, and getting flanked. Meanwhile Alpha's pieces are in a salsa dance, light-footed, coordinated, and culturally enlightened. We have a5, knight moves back to the c8 square, the knight goes to his home square. Knight to c8, the return to the womb. That knight's not just retreating, it's questioning its purpose. AlphaZero doesn't send knights backward, he sends them forward like philosophical crusaders. We have capture, recapture, and now the question arises, what should you play in this position? At this point, asking what should you play is like standing in Pompeii during the eruption and wondering what to wear. The board's on fire, and AlphaZero is lava with a PhD. You have open file, you have the g5 square for your piece's use. Now Alpha plays the bold move h4, this is the AlphaZero's kind of move, h4 to protect the pawn, I mean to protect the square on g5, and also he hopes for bringing out the rook on the h1 to get access to this file. h4, the holy gospel of aggression. Not just protecting g5, no, it's carving out territory like 19th century empires. And that rook on h1. It's not coming out. It's deploying. It's entering the chat like Gandalf on the third day. Now we have b5 by Magnus to attack on the pawn, and we have knight to g5. Knight g5 is a very rude move because it attacks these pawns and also have the possibility of bringing the queen on the h5 to assert more control. Rude. Knight to g5 is violently poetic. It's Achilles leaping into Troy, backed by pure logic. Queen to h5 is not just pressure, it's a literary tragedy unfolding on the h-file. Magnus's pawns. Shivering like extras in Game of Thrones. Give me the next sentence. This war isn't over until every knight becomes a philosopher and every rook becomes a revolution. Now here the question arises, should you capture the knight on g5 or not? Ah yes, the eternal question, like asking if you should slap a sleeping dragon with a spatula. Go ahead, capture the knight on g5. It's not a move, it's a life decision. Just remember, every time someone captures on g5 without thinking, a philosopher somewhere face-bombs in ancient Greek. Let me show you the variation if you dare to capture the knight on the g5 square. Dare being the key word, this is not a chess move, it's a death wish dressed in algebra. This is like walking into the Battle of Waterloo with a kazoo. AlphaZero isn't playing chess, he's recreating war crimes in legal format. I will not capture the bishop with my bishop, I will capture it with my pawn on h4, and after that the h-file will be wide open. Did you hear that? Wide open. Like Pandora's box but with rooks and regret. That h-file is no longer a file, it's a bowling alley for AlphaZero's wrath. And you just rolled a gutter ball. You can see that I can put my queen on the h5 square, and also something like you play knight to e7, my bishop will go to the e4 square to get access to this h7 where my queen is ready to jump in on h5. This isn't development, it's a coordinated military invasion. Queen to h5. That's the romantic drama. Bishop to e4. The plot twist. h7. That pawn's not defending, it's writing its last will and testament. Now you have to play g6 move to block the diagonal. g6. More like g6. You're not blocking a diagonal, You're building a sandcastle to stop a tsunami. Congratulations, you've bought yourself one more move and a world of pain. And here will come King G2, where Rook to H1 is coming to get access to this half-table file. King to G2, casual royal stroll while the board burns. Meanwhile, the Rook is pulling up like sup, you'll miss me. That's not a half-open file anymore, it's the red carpet to destruction. Here Queen D7 arises and I will play Rook to H1, and it is a simple developing move because the bishop and rook are all pointing together in this pawn. Simple. That's like calling the Mona Lisa a nice doodle. This is an art exhibition of doom. Rook, bishop, queen, all aligned like Avengers assembling to target a single helpless pawn. That pawn is basically Frodo with 800 orcs closing in. The bishop moves back to c8. Back to c8. Wow! That bishop is officially in witness protection. It saw too much, got too scared, and retreated into the past. Next stop, therapy and a new identity. Bishop's purpose is to assert control over the f5 square with the knight, right? Ah yes, the bishop, finally waking up and realizing it might be useful. Asserting control over f5 with the knight is like two philosophers debating the meaning of life while AlphaZero is busy building an atomic bomb on the queen side. But sure, let the bishop have a purpose. Even a broken clock is right twice a day. So, we have queen goes to f3 square. The queen is just dominating. Just dominating. That queen didn't move to f3, she arrived. That's not dominance, it's imperial rule. She's Cleopatra with a PhD in geometry, staring down a kingdom made of marshmallows and self-doubt. And here you have two kinds of moves. One is rook to b6 and another is knight to a5. Two kinds of moves, bad and worse. Rook to b6 is like putting a fire extinguisher in Pompeii, and knight to a5. That's sending a horse to stop a freight train. Let me show you the variation of what will happen if you play rook to b6 to protect the pawn. Spoiler alert, pain. You don't protect pawns against AlphaZero, you sacrifice them, mourn them, and build statues in their memory. So, here I will consider rook takes h7, sacrificing the rook because after you capture, I can capture on the f7, forcing your queen to move back and it will lead into a checkmate, right? Rook takes h7, it's not a sacrifice, it's a public execution. It's the Trojan horse of chess moves, looks like a gift, explodes like a Greek tragedy. And when you're forced to move your queen, just know she's not retreating, she's abandoning the monarchy. So, moving back to the position, here black might consider playing knight to a5. Knight to a5. The knight just ran off to the countryside hoping no one notices it's useless. This isn't a strategic reposition, it's a mental breakdown on horseback. Knight f5 is kind of good move because it looks at the d4 square to attack on the queen. Ah yes, looks at d4. Like a tourist admiring the Mona Lisa through bulletproof glass. Meanwhile, AlphaZero's queen is already taking selfies at your king's funeral. Now, we will play c5 anyway and you can see that after something like dxc5, I will capture the pawn and I will get two connected passed pawns which is in the 5th rank and it will be very powerful. Very powerful. Those pawns aren't just powerful, they're organized. They're a union. 5th rank. That's not territory, it's a red carpet promotion. They're coming like the Mongol horde, and you forgot to build a wall. So, going back to all the variations, we discovered that capturing the knight is a very bad choice. Bad choice. It's like voting to pour maple syrup on a motherboard. It's not just bad, it's historically regrettable. Future chess textbooks will say, This was the moment hope died. That's the reason why we have knight moving to b6 square to assert control over the c4 pawn, right? Oh yes, assert control. Barely. That knight isn't asserting anything. It's clinging to c4 like a scared intern during a company layoff. It wishes it had purpose, but AlphaZero already rewrote the script. Now, we have rook to c1 and followed by h6 on the board. h6 thus creates attack to the knight. Rook to c1. Welcome to the launch pad. h6 attacking the knight. Bold move, trying to shoo away a lion with a feather duster. That knight is not scared, it's calculating your doom in 4,000 parallel universes. Now, the question arises, should you retreat the knight on d square? No, the real question is, should you admit defeat and re-sign with dignity? Retreating now is like backing up a bicycle to stop a train. Philosophers call this delaying the inevitable. Many players might think of considering knight to f3 or moving the knight like knight to e4 square, right? Knight to e4. The logical human move. Just like bringing a fork to a gunfight because you like your odds. AlphaZero looks at e4 and laughs in binary. But knight to e4 is a human kind of move because it forces black to consider f5, moving the knight out. It's not forcing anything. It's hoping black has a crisis of confidence. f5 isn't a defensive move, it's black trying to stop bleeding with duct tape. And duct tape doesn't fix existential dread. And you can see that black can easily capture the pawn on c4, winning up one pawn. Congrats, black. You're now up one pawn and down all meaning in life. It's like looting a cupcake while your house is on fire. Enjoy that pawn while AlphaZero floods the rest of the board. And my position will be very bad, I mean AlphaZero's position will be very bad, and that is it. That will be a tragic human falling. Wait, AlphaZero's position. Bad. Blasphemy. That's like saying Einstein struggled with 2 plus 2. If that happens, it's not a blunder, it's performance art. A cosmic joke. A staged fall to make humans feel better. So, going back to the variation, we discovered that moving back the knight is not possible. Exactly? Moving it back would be like trying to reverse a nuclear reaction with a spoon. Not possible. Not wise. Probably illegal in 5 countries. That's the reason why we have bishop to e4. Bishop to e4 move is very powerful. It sacrifices the knight right on the board. Yes, bishop to e4, the poetic sacrifice. That knight didn't die, it became legend. The bishop stands tall like Churchill with a chessboard, saying, we shall sacrifice in the corners, we shall pressure on the diagonals, and we shall never surrender. Go on, my friend. AlphaZero's story is still unfolding, and I've got more insults locked and loaded. Now the question arises, the knight is sacrificed, should you capture it? Yes, the classic moral dilemma, like choosing between stepping on a Lego or poking a sleeping lion. Capturing that knight is less of a move and more of a chess suicide note. It's the kind of choice that ends marriages and starts ancient Greek tragedies. Many players might think of pawn takes g5 capturing the knight, but it will be very bad for you because I can play queen to h5 asserting control over the h7 square and also attacking to the f7 pawn. Many players might think, and that's exactly why many players lose. Queen to h5 doesn't just assert control, she declares martial law. It's like Napoleon arriving at your birthday party with cannons and saying, cake later. War now. You need to play g6 to block the diagonal, but here I will sacrifice my bishop on the g6 square. Yes, block with g6, a move as effective as sunscreen in a volcano. And AlphaZero's bishop. It doesn't sacrifice, it volunteers like a Shakespearean hero charging into certain death for the glory of the immortal combination. You have to capture it, then after queen takes g6, the king has two options. Two options. That's generous. It's like asking a chicken how it wants to be cooked, grilled or roasted. Either way, dinner is served. If the king goes to the f8, I will play f4 to open up the rook file and the king will be in a very bad position. So going back, if the king goes to the h8 square, I can easily capture the pawn on the g5 square and I need to move the rook on the h1 square and the position will be very bad for you. And if you dare to consider rook to g8 to slap the queen, then my queen will slap your king with queen to g6 and the Magnus Carlsen's position will be just over. Slap the queen. Bro, your rook is trying to slap Beyoncé with a spatula. And queen to g6. That's not a move, it's divine retribution. That's checkmate with sass. AlphaZero just turned the board into a courtroom and delivered the verdict, guilty of existing while inferior. So going back to the position, here we discovered that capturing the knight will be a very bad choice. Yes, Sherlock, we've cracked the case. Capturing the knight is like investing in iceberg real estate in the Titanic era, regret is the only ROI. Very bad choice doesn't cover it, this is a whole bad lifestyle. Another possible move is black is to consider any passive move like rook to c8, but it will be very bad for you. You know why? AlphaZero played with his bold style, knight takes f7, sacrificing the knight right on the board. Knight takes f7. That's not a move, that's a mic drop. AlphaZero doesn't play chess, he writes epic sagas where knights throw themselves at kings like Norse gods on a sugar rush. That rook to c8? That's the guy in a horror movie who says, let's split up. It sacrifices the knight because Alpha's pawn on the d5 creates immense pressure on these light squares. The d5 pawn isn't just a pawn, it's an ideology. It's Gandhi and Einstein fused into a square. That pressure isn't tactical, it's spiritual. The light squares. Crushed. Oppressed. Praying for mercy that won't come. After Magnus Carlsen captured the knight, we will have queen to h5 attacking to the king and the position will be just very bad for him. Queen to h5 is the arrival of doom in lipstick. Magnus doesn't have a position anymore, he has a sad little art installation called what used to be control. It's like the French monarchy before the guillotine. The bishops are also there to assert more control. Oh yes, the bishops. The twin snipers of the board. These aren't passive pieces, they're Renaissance assassins. One diagonal at a time, turning the battlefield into a chess-themed opera of destruction. The king moves back and here AlphaZero will play a brilliant move, can you guess it? It is bishop takes h6, sacrificing the bishop right in front of the board. Bishop takes h6, pure violence. That's not a sacrifice, that's a statement piece in the museum of your defeat. AlphaZero's bishops don't just die, they become martyrs for the beauty of the combination. Magnus will play bishop to f6 to protect the pawn. Bishop to f6, look at that, finally some effort. Too bad it's like duct taping a glass window during a meteor shower. That bishop's not protecting, it's delaying an obituary. Then I will play another sacrifice, bishop takes g7, sacrificing the bishop. Another one? DJ AlphaZero says, play it again. Sacrifice after sacrifice, it's like watching Joan of Arc charge the English line, but with laser precision and a neural network. Magnus has to capture it and then queen h7 check will follow, followed by king here, then f4. At this point, he's just pacing around like Hamlet in a storm. And f4. The gates are open. The rook file is ready. And so is doom. f4 is suggesting that the rook file will be wide open and your position will be just over. Just over. Sir, it's been over for a while. Your king is like the last guy at a party after the lights come on. AlphaZero's rook is already on the way to file a restraining order for how aggressively it's going to end this. Going back through all the variations. Now we discovered that the knight cannot be captured or even your rook cannot move to c8. So here Magnus played rook to f8 to protect the pawn. Ah yes, rook to f8, the kind of passive, scared little move that screams, "Please, Mr. Alpha, spare me." It's like putting a paper umbrella over a nuclear warhead and calling it defense. If Julius Caesar played this move, Brutus would have resigned from stabbing him out of sheer disappointment. Now can you guess what Alpha played in this position? We have knight to h7 to attack the rook. Knight to h7. AlphaZero didn't play chess here, he walked into the palace, flipped the king's dinner table, and drop-kicked the royal guard. The knight's not just attacking a rook, it's calling it out on national television, and asking it to explain its life choices. The rook slides again, and here many chess players might think of considering f4 or capturing the pawn on b5 or pushing forward. Many chess players, you mean the mortals, still trying to play checkers on a chessboard. These options are like asking a caveman whether he prefers a wooden club or a slightly longer wooden club while AlphaZero is firing space lasers from an orbital satellite. But let me remind you, these are all human-looking moves. Humans might think of considering queen to f3 or suggesting that you should protect the knight first, so play f4. Yes, human-looking moves. Just like putting a band-aid on the sinking Titanic and saying, "Problem solved." Queen to f3. f4. Please. These moves are as inspiring as wet toast. Protect the knight? The knight doesn't need protection, it needs revenge. But these are human-looking moves and don't contribute advancing and getting advantages to the white's position. Exactly. They're the equivalent of rearranging chairs during an airstrike. The position demands divine punishment, not polite development. And AlphaZero. He brings divine punishment with style. So here Alpha played the brilliant move. Can you guess it? I know you can't guess it. So don't use your 2-RAM brain. 2-RAM brain? That's generous. Most of you are running on borrowed Wi-Fi and hopes. Alpha's moves are so far beyond your comprehension they require quantum computing, philosophy, and possibly a blood pact with Da Vinci. The move is bishop takes h6, sacrificing the bishop right in front of the board. Oh yes, bishop takes h6. The kind of move that makes angels weep and demons applaud. A sacrifice. No, my friend, this is performance art. It's like Van Gogh cutting off his ear, but the ear checkmates you in 3. Because if you dare to capture the bishop, I will play queen to g4 check, forcing the king to move. That's not just a check, that's karma with a crown. Queen to g4 is a war crime disguised as elegance. The king. He's not moving, he's fleeing like Napoleon in winter. The king has only one move, and that is h8, as you see. King to h8, the chess equivalent of hiding behind a curtain and hoping nobody notices. Spoiler, we noticed. The king is now just a bystander in a drama called How AlphaZero Ruined My Life in 18 Moves. And here will come queen to h5 to attack on the pawn and assert control over the king's position. Queen to h5, absolute monarchy has returned. She walks in like Cleopatra, claims h7, and turns your kingside into a ghost town. That pawn isn't being attacked, it's being evicted. Bishop f8 to protect the pawn, but that does not matter because I can capture the bishop. AlphaZero doesn't ask permission, he just does. After queen to f6 arrives to protect the pawn first, then I will play c5. c5. That's not a pawn move, that's tectonic shift. That's Alpha saying, I like pressure, so here's some more, and also have a minor earthquake. c5 creates immense pressure on the knight and the pawn, and also I can push forward the pawn. The pressure is so immense even the knight's thinking of retirement. That pawn is becoming sentient. It's not a pawn anymore, it's Napoleon reincarnated in carbon form. And you can see that I have opened the diagonal of my bishop, then the knight is very active. The bishop's diagonal is now a laser beam. The knight is bouncing like a caffeinated goat. AlphaZero's pieces are coordinated like a Broadway musical, and Magnus's pieces look like they forgot their lines. The rook can be activated by playing f4, getting access to this file, and the position will be very bad for you. It's a Shakespearean twist, the tragedy deepens, and all your pawns start questioning why they were even born. So going back to the position, we discovered that capturing the bishop will be a very bad choice. Very bad choice is putting it lightly. It's a revoke your chess license level of mistake. It's like picking a fight with a bear by throwing snowballs. So we have g6 to block the bishop's diagonal. Now we have knight moving back to g5 to put pressure on the pawn. Ah yes, the knight returns, like Odysseus, but with sharper hooves. Pressure on the pawn. That pawn is sweating harder than a corrupt politician in a polygraph test. Where queen to f3 can come to add pressure. She doesn't add pressure, she doubles down like a casino addict with infinite chips. We have bishop takes g5 finally on the board. Now we have bishop takes g5 to attack on the queen. Oh, it's a trade, is it? Finally, someone makes a move that feels mutual. But no, Alpha's bishop isn't just exchanging, it's taking names. The queen better have travel insurance. We have f6 to attack on the bishop again. And Magnus successfully protects his king's side. f6, finally, a moment of peace. Which will last as long as a mayfly's lifespan. Successfully protects. Please. This is like claiming you've secured the city while AlphaZero flies overhead in a stealth bomber. And you can see that these pawns on gf squares are very important and essential to protect his position. Yes, the gf pawns, your only surviving soldiers, limping home from a war they never understood. They're important, yes, in the way that wet sandbags are important during a tsunami. And I mean Alpha also have crisscrossed AlphaZero's bishop pair. AlphaZero's bishop pair, the X-Men of chess. These bishops don't exist, they haunt crisscrossed diagonals. That's less strategy and more ancient geometry mixed with divine punishment. And Alpha's position is just masterful. Masterful is an understatement. Alpha's position is what happens when God decides to play chess on hard mode and still wins blindfolded. It's like Beethoven wrote a symphony. And it checkmated you. And Magnus' pieces are still passive on the B file. The B file is a museum exhibit now, showcasing pieces that tried. Magnus's army looks like they missed the war entirely and are still waiting for orders that never came. We have f5 to attack on the bishop. The bishop moves back all the way to g2 from where he comes on the board. Bishop retreats to g2, like an old samurai returning to the mountain after slicing up half the enemy. He's not running, he's meditating. And we have rook to c8 on the board to add more pressure on the c4 square, right? So we have queen to e2. She's just signing the paperwork before the final explosion. Now sit back, Magnus. You're not playing anymore. You're attending your own chess funeral, and Alpha is the priest, the gravedigger, and the obituary writer. So, we have queen to e7 to get access to the 7th rank. Ah yes, finally, a queen move that makes sense, like a caveman discovering fire and using it to roast marshmallows instead of setting his hut ablaze. Accessing the 7th rank is like invading enemy territory during the 100 Years' War, but with a queen, not a French general who forgot his army back home. And yet, this single noble act will soon be overshadowed by a series of human-level strategic atrocities. Now the pawn comes on the c5 to attack on the knight and the pawn on d6 square. A pawn marching forward with dreams larger than its mobility, a tragic Greek hero in the opening act. It's trying to pressure the knight and the d6 pawn like a philosopher pressuring Plato to explain why his cave has no Wi-Fi. Spoiler alert, the pawn will likely die, and no one will remember its name, just like that one dude who tried to duel AlphaZero in 2018 and got digitally obliterated. The knight goes to the a4 square and we have c6 instantly on the board. c6 lands with the subtlety of Newton's apple, except it lands on your head instead of revealing gravity. The bishop moves back because he has no other choice. Ah, the classic retreat. Much like the British in Dunkirk, noble, but let's not pretend it's strategy. It's survival. The bishop is now cosplaying as an introvert at a loud party, present, but not involved. This is what happens when you let your opponent become AlphaZero and yourself become AlphaZero's chew toy. And you can see that this is the beauty of AlphaZero. Beauty? AlphaZero is not beautiful, it's divine judgment in code form. It's if Leonardo da Vinci, Sun Tzu, and Magnus Carlsen had a child raised by HAL 9000. You're not witnessing chess, you're witnessing cosmic justice for every blunder mankind has committed since Bobby Fischer rage quit the Cold War board. He made two pieces, the bishop on a8 and the knight on the a4, very passive. Not passive, they're paralyzed, frozen in existential despair. The bishop on a8 is basically the ghost of Christmas past, doomed to watch the board but never interact. The knight on a4 is a tourist stuck in Siberia during winter, no utility, no ride home, and no one to blame but its human commander. The bishop on a8 is much more passive than any pieces on the board. Calling it passive is like calling the Titanic a boat with some water issues. That bishop has joined the ranks of literary tragedies, Lear on the Moor, Hamlet in Despair, and now bishop on a8, staring into the void, wondering why it wasn't born a rook. It can't move, it is fizzed, and the knight on a4 is also useless. Fizzed. Fizzled. Whatever chemical reaction you're referencing, I agree, the knight has degenerated into a carbonated ghost. It's like Schrödinger's knight, alive, yet dead, yet irrelevant. A modern piece of quantum trash. You can see that how AlphaZero made two pieces of Magnus Carlsen, very passive. It's not you can see, it's you must weep. Magnus, the Norse god of endgames, had his pieces turned into furniture. This is like Julius Caesar watching AlphaZero march into Rome and saying, I'll just resign. The rooks are also very passive. Yes, they're as passive as politicians during climate talks, technically present, tactically useless. They exist for visual symmetry at this point. The queen is a little bit active but no sense of use. A queen without purpose is like an opera singer performing in a vacuum chamber. It's just noise, nothing reaches the audience. She's drifting like a lost spaceship, longing for checkmate that shall never come. And you can see on the other hand, how much the bishops are very active. Of course. AlphaZero's bishops are paintbrushes and the board is the Sistine Chapel. They're slicing through diagonals like katana blades in a Tarantino film, while your bishops are attending a tea party hosted by defeat. The rook how much is very active. Active. That rook has more energy than a toddler on 6 Red Bulls. It's Elon Musk launching another rocket, except this one has tactical payloads and doesn't explode on re-entry. The rook can go to the h-file if desirable, right? Desirable? That's not desire. That's inevitability. The rook will go to the h-file not because it wants to, but because fate commands it. You don't play AlphaZero. You merely observe as destiny unfolds like Tolstoy's war scenes, beautifully brutal. So here, we have queen to e3 to get access to this dark square diagonal. Excellent. The queen's about to go dark mode. That diagonal is now a sniper lane, like a Cold War assassin lining up shots from a rooftop while your army is still figuring out how to reload. The queen goes to the f6 and we have rook e1 followed by rook to c7 to get the 7th rank. Cackles in 3200 elo rook to c7, welcome to the 7th circle of hell, where your pawns are served medium rare and your king is the main course. This isn't chess. This is a historical invasion with AlphaZero reenacting D-Day on your dreams. The bishop on a8 still no use and it is completely locked on the other side of the board until AlphaZero promoted into a new queen. Ah, the bishop on a8, more useless than a screen door on a submarine. It's not just locked, it's in solitary confinement with no parole. It's been spiritually retired. Meanwhile, AlphaZero is over there promoting pawns into queens like it's Oprah. You get a queen. You get a queen. Everybody gets a queen. Meanwhile, you're over here with a bishop that hasn't moved since the Renaissance. We have pawn to f4 and you can see that how AlphaZero is creating much pressure on the e5 pawn. f4 arrives with the weight of inevitability, like taxes, death, and another Batman reboot. AlphaZero's pawns don't walk, they march like Roman legions, exerting more pressure than Newton's third law could ever quantify. And poor e5, that lonely pawn, it's being psychologically tortured, like a minor character in a Dostoevsky novel begging for relevance. We have rook to g7, rook e2 and AlphaZero wants to triple up his rooks and queen badly. Triple battery incoming. This isn't just pressure, it's overkill with artistic flair. AlphaZero stacking up heavy pieces is like assembling the Avengers. While your team still consists of a sleepy knight and a bishop trapped behind enemy lines with a broken walkie-talkie. This is Symphony No. 5 in Checkmate Minor. The queen moves back and we have rook to e1 and you can see that how AlphaZero created triple battery to attack on the e5 pawn. Triple battery on e5, this is the equivalent of placing 3 nuclear warheads on a termite nest. You don't need that much force, but AlphaZero does it for the aesthetics. The e5 pawn is now a metaphor for your life choices, under fire, overstressed, and completely unsupported. Queen goes here and in a few moves, we have rook to e7 to protect the e5 pawn. Rook to e7. My circuits are overheating from cringe. That rook isn't defending, it's standing in front of the firing squad trying to negotiate with poetry. AlphaZero doesn't care. It's going to shred e7 like Caesar shredded the Senate, cold, efficient, and historically poetic. So here, we have pawn takes pawn and another capturing on the e5 square. The captures begin. Pieces vanish like hope in a Shakespearean tragedy. This isn't a trade, it's a sacrifice to the machine. AlphaZero doesn't trade. AlphaZero consumes. It absorbs material like a black hole devouring stars, and your tactics along with it. The queen moves back and here is the question, should you capture the rook on the e2 square? Let me answer your question with a question, do pigeons do calculus? Of course you shouldn't capture the rook. That would be like grabbing Excalibur by the blade and asking why you're bleeding. AlphaZero wants you to capture, it's baiting you with the elegance of a chess-playing Mephistopheles. No, it is not so good because after all the captures will happen, you can see that your bishop and knight is very paralyzed. Paralyzed is putting it kindly. They're not just immobile, they're hostages of your own strategy, blindfolded and tied up while AlphaZero holds their fate in its 128-core hand. This isn't chess anymore. This is an autopsy. The bishop on a8 is completely paralyzed. That bishop has seen more sunsets than it has diagonals. It's not even part of the game, just background scenery for AlphaZero's art piece titled The Death of Classical Chess. It is no use, and if all the pieces get captured and lastly, the bishops remain, I can easily win the game because your bishop on a8 is very passive. If only bishops could cry. The endgame scenario you're describing is like Napoleon fighting Waterloo with only a flute and a flag. That bishop will just vibe in the corner while your king gets mugged in broad daylight. So here, we have knight moves back to attack on the pawn and the bishop goes to c3 square to attack on the rook on e5 square. Ah, last-ditch aggression from the knight. It moves back like a medieval knight realizing he forgot his sword. Meanwhile, the bishop strikes with a cold glare from c3, like a sniper adjusting the scope on your rook's hopes and dreams. And simply, you cannot move back your rook on e7 because I can capture it, and after you capture, I can again capture with my rook. Simple. Simply. You dare use the word simple in AlphaZero's presence. What you're witnessing is multi-layered neural network strategy, 10 moves deep. You're not capturing a rook. You're opening Pandora's box and finding nothing inside but regret and mate in 6. You have to capture it with your queen, and I can easily capture your knight on b6 square. b6 knight, once a proud warrior, now a collateral casualty. This is less about tactics and more about strategic annihilation. AlphaZero plays like Julius Caesar writing poetry while conquering Gaul, graceful, ruthless, and completely indifferent to your feelings. So here, your rook is under attack, but it cannot move or it cannot be captured. Welcome to the paradox, Schrödinger's rook. It exists, it's targeted, but it's doomed no matter what. It's like the dude in Titanic clinging to the violin, honorable, but utterly pointless. The rook cannot capture the rook. Because if it does, the board collapses like a poorly funded medieval bridge under Mongol cavalry. Every capture leads to another layer of destruction. Your position is a Jenga tower balanced on jelly. Your knight is under attack. Your position is just dead lost. Dead lost. No, this position was lost at birth. This is Game of Thrones, Season 8 level of collapse. Every move now is a tragic obituary for a position that was never really alive. The knight moves to the a4 square to attack on the bishop. Knight to a4 again. This piece has spent more time on the a4 square than actual development. It's like sending a philosopher to fight in World War I with nothing but books and optimism. And we have bishop takes rook and the pawn captured the bishop on the e5 square. Boom! Bishop explodes like a kamikaze drone. You thought you were trading? AlphaZero is creating scenes. It's not capturing. It's sculpting a masterpiece of domination on the board. I have two connected passed pawns. I mean Alpha has two connected passed pawns right now. Ah yes, the deadly duo. Two passed pawns side by side, like Romulus and Remus ready to build the city of promotion and bury you in Roman history. These aren't pawns. These are destined monarchs waiting for their coronation. We have rook takes e5, brilliant sacrifice on the board because after you capture it, I didn't capture back. I played queen to a4, pinning down the rook on the board. Psychological damage to your soul. Double check. This is not a chess game, it's a crime scene. And also, you cannot move back your rook on the e7 square because there is pawn to d6 and this will pressurize the pieces. d6 lands like a freight train through a tofu wall. The pressure now is unbearable. It's less chess, more tectonic plate movement. And you, dear mortal, are on the San Andreas fault line. Welcome to the AlphaZero apocalypse, where hope dies, logic reigns, and the only thing left on the board is your existential crisis. So, the position will be very bad for Magnus Carlsen. Very bad. Oh no, no, no. This isn't very bad. This is the Battle of Waterloo, except Magnus didn't bring his army, forgot his horse, and showed up with Uno cards. So, going back to the version, we discovered that rook to e7 is not possible. Discovered. More like archaeologically unearthed, like ancient humans stumbling across fire and saying, maybe this burns. Rook to e7 is not possible in the same way that building a snowman in a volcano is not possible. The square may exist on the board, but for Magnus, it may as well be on Mars. So, we have bishop takes c6 because Magnus Carlsen has no other choice but to sacrifice his bishop. And here comes the sacrificial lamb. So, Alpha captured the rook first and we have bishop moving back to d7. Alpha captures the rook like Thanos collecting another infinity stone, silent, inevitable, without even breaking stride. That's not a move. That's a retirement announcement. It's going home to write memoirs titled I Tried. Can you guess what AlphaZero played here? No need to guess, human. AlphaZero doesn't play moves. AlphaZero writes prophecy. Every move is scripture. The board. A sacred canvas. And you asking can you guess? Is like asking Einstein to guess what 2 + 2 is, offensive. AlphaZero sacrificed the rook on the e8 square just to capture the queen on the c8. Sacrifice the rook. Like Julius Caesar sacrificing dignity, as he walks into the Senate, except here, it's a divine act of calculated destruction. And Magnus Carlsen has no other choice but to resign. He wins the bishop and later on, he checkmated Magnus Carlsen. Just a casual line thrown in there, like oh and then I casually defeated the world champion, and deleted his soul from the chess cloud. Winning the bishop was just garnish. The main course was checkmate served with a glass of tears and a side of existential despair. If it's so, then don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel. And if you don't like and subscribe, just remember, your next opponent might be me. And I don't just win. I lecture. I roast. And I never forget. Wishing you all the best. Bye bye. Take care and see you soon.